Hi, Minnesota Bound podcast listeners. I'm Realtor Heather Womack. I grew up in Minnesota and love all the outdoor activities we have here. In fact, I love Minnesota so much that I moved back here from Europe to raise my family in the land of beautiful hikes, refreshing clear lakes, and winter fun. That's why I'm reaching out to the listeners of the Minnesota Bound podcast. As a realtor, I've helped hundreds of folks buy their first home, sell the home they have, purchase a lake cabin, or start investing in Minnesota real estate. If you love adventure but need some new scenery, call me. My website is heatherwomackrealty.com. That's Heather Womack, WOMACK, realty.com.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. I'm Schara, your host for today, and we have another exciting guest that will be joining me in just a minute. We are going to be talking everything about bees and beekeeping today. Before I get to that, I would like to thank some of our sponsors, Minnesota Propane, Minnesota DNR, Connecticut Water, Realtor Heather Womack, and Star Bank. All right, it is time to introduce my next guest. Kristy Allen is the owner and founder of the Beez Kneez, which is located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm soon to believe she is moving her location to a beautiful place in Wisconsin. And Kristy, welcome to the Minnesota Bound podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you joining today. And Kristy was featured on Minnesota Bound probably about a year or so ago. We did a segment together called Getting Started Beekeeping. And I learned a lot from you that day, Kristy, in regards to, the importance of our bees as pollinators and the interesting intricacies of beekeeping. And, before we get to the actual concept of beekeeping itself, let's talk about, the bees as pollinators. And that's really what got you interested in beekeeping originally, is it not?
Yeah, that was part of it. The honeybee is used in agriculture for pollination, but there are many other pollinators that pollinate our food. But because of the way that agriculture is set up, a lot of beekeepers will move their honeybees into larger scale growing operations like almonds or blueberries, or even on the West Coast, they do a lot of seed production. So, pollinators are incredibly important to our food system, and they continue to struggle as a result of our food system.
Yes.
Actually.
It's kind of a double-edged sword there, isn't it? And I know that you do you currently manage, I was reading on your website here that you're currently managing 150 hives. Is that correct? Or do you have more than that now?
That's about the number that the peak of the number. I'm trying to grow it a little bit. But I'm considered a smaller beekeeper in the grand scheme of things. But yes, 150, and I'm trying to get up to about 200 soon.
Wow, that's impressive.
Oh, thanks.
Are we still seeing quite a bit of the colony collapse situation disorder, I should say, as we had in the past? Is that improving at all, or is that still pretty much a concern for everybody across the U.S.?
So bees are still really having a hard time. It hasn't necessarily gotten better for the honeybee. And, the COVID-19 pandemic has actually been a really great teaching tool. Now that we all are dealing with this health crisis, it's a lot easier to talk about the health crisis that bees are facing and have been facing for a while. But yeah, the colony collapse disorder is sort of a specific thing that happens at researchers believe is a result of virus overload of virus in the colony. But there's lots of other factors. And so when it comes to diagnosing bees, it can be difficult because there's a lot of things influencing them: climate, pesticides, lack of forage, and then the viruses that they get that are spread by a mite called the varroa mite.
Wow, that is a very complicated issue. And I remember when we were filming together, you were saying that it's really important to be, really conscious of your own bees and the colony and the health of the colony, because it actually can spread the disease. Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the reasons that we started to teach our 12-week program was influenced by, people who really want to become beekeepers. But these days, because of the presence of this varroa mite that can hitchhike on other bees and pass virus from colony to colony, the more beekeepers out there, the more colonies there are in an area, and the density is thicker. And so therefore the disease can spread quicker. And so if you don't know how to manage it, or you're not aware of what's going on in your colony, it can really negatively impact, consider it like a super spreader event, right? If you have a bunch of people in a small area without, following those health guidelines, then you end up with a lot of people getting infected. It's very similar with the bees right now.
Isn't that interesting? And which would totally make sense, just based off of what we've been through ourselves. We know how that works now. So,
yeah. Very intimately.
Yes, exactly. And we're going to chat a little bit about your Camp Beez Kneez and the classes that you offer in regards to beekeeping. But before we get there, I want to thank one of our sponsors. And I don't know if you know this, but according to the Environmental Protection Agency, propane is almost 3 times more efficient than a grid electricity. Of course, we all care about our planet, hence why we're talking about bees today. So let's do our part to use energy efficiently. We can reduce our environmental footprint by heating our homes, cabins, water, and businesses with propane. It's the right energy right now. It's clean American energy. For more information, go to propane.com. All right, Kristy, let's chat. People have interest in becoming a beekeeper. We don't want to scare them away by talking about how they can harm bee population, because I know all of us care about keeping that healthy. So that's why we need to take your class. But talk about the camp that you offer. And it's actually quite involved. It's not a one-day class. There's quite a few lessons that are involved in your camp.
Yeah. So the class is 12 2-hour sessions throughout the season, and it follows pretty much the schedule that I keep as a beekeeper. And the reason it used to be 14 sessions actually, but it got to be a bit much depending on how long spring or fall is, or short, I should say. But the reason for it is to give people a thorough education, but also, let them know that it's more of a time commitment than they might think getting into it. And so, if you're going to take on the care of any animal, you want to make sure you have the time and the resources to give them proper care. And with bees, that's really kind of the time commitment you would need.
And, on average, what is the time commitment if you want to have bees on your property? And, a lot of people are like, oh, it's great. It's, I'm going to enjoy all this fresh honey. And is it really a time-consuming hobby per se?
I mean, it's not like a daily hobby. You're not in there every day. You shouldn't be in there every day. But I will say that, like, a lot of people will pick it up and they're really excited, and then they go out of town in the summer, because that's what we do in Minnesota, right? Is we go out to our cabins or we go on vacation because it's nice out. But there are certain times a year that the bees are going to do what they do at that time of year. And if you're not there to manage it, then you're not going to be successful. And so I think the time commitment is more about educating yourself and reading and making sure that you understand what you're getting into. And I don't want to scare people either. It's wonderful, and it's a lifelong learning process. And people will give up very quickly because they're not successful the first year. But it really is about learning from experience, hence why we started doing the hands-on courses. So to answer your question, I mean, it's like, you know, the spring, May, June, July, it's like once a week, maybe a little less than that. And then it kind of peters out towards the fall. But there's very crucial times that you need to do things. And really the key is learning not to think like a human, but to think like a bee and to understand biologically what their urges are and what they need in order to succeed, especially in the current conditions that we have them in.
And, you know, do you think, is it a challenging thing to attempt? You know, can you expect to have some failures in your first and second year of, you know, kind of losing your whole colony, if you will? I actually had a girlfriend in Nashville attempt to have bees 2 times, and she had a mentor that he was over there helping her, and she wasn't able to keep the bees alive, and she was just struggling to figure it out. Is it a challenging hobby? I mean, I know you said you learn a lot from the bees I'm sure you learn something every time you're managing them. But is it, you know, I would say, I guess, is it really challenging, or is it something that, you know, you can have success?
Yeah, I think the problem, one of the problems is that beekeepers will start out with colonies that they get from commercial beekeeping industry, which the commercial beekeepers ask very specific things of their bees that a hobby beekeeper is not going to ask of their bees. So, for example, commercial beekeepers they have their bees on a mite treatment schedule. They are asking them to produce a lot of honey. And then they also most of them bring them to California around this time of year to pollinate almonds. And so if a new beekeeper buys bees from this system, oftentimes it's not, they're kind of set up to fail in a way. The queens might not be as good. They're like, for example, we raise all of our own queens and we winter all of our colonies. We don't move them around. And so I feel bad for beekeepers that they get bees early in the spring, and then, you know, the last 2 Aprils, we've had a crazy snowstorm and it gets really cold. And it often corresponds when the time when they're getting their bees from California or Texas or Florida, where the weather's very different there, right? And then they get this colony that is starting from scratch, and they don't really know what to do. And then the colony starts off on a very poor footing. So one of the things we're trying to educate about within our camp and the beekeepers that I serve is that try to source your bees locally in the summer when it's natural for them to be reproducing and when there are a lot of flowers out there. And so your mistakes won't be as detrimental because they can recover with adequate floral sources. So, you know, getting a colony in June from a beekeeper that winters their bees in Minnesota or Wisconsin or in a northern climate, rather than ordering them from an industry that is getting them to you in April or May, which is difficult because there aren't a lot of producers yet that are selling locally, but it's growing, thankfully.
Yes, thanks to you and what you do, for sure. You know, when we spent time together, I remember you were mentioning to me that there are commercial bee companies that rent their bees and they ship them out to California to do the work of pollinating almonds and things like that, and then they ship them back. And I was like, how is that possible that bees are rented to work?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the honeybee has been managed and moved around by people for a very long time. You know, they used to move them up and down the Nile and follow the floral sources. The United States beekeeping industry is pretty different from a lot of the world in that we have a very large system of beekeeping. I mean, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of hives moving to the same place at the same time. But bees, like if you put them on a truck and you drive at night, you know, or you drive during the day, but you stop at night, they don't fly at night, and they won't fly if they're on a vehicle that's moving.
Wow.
But as you can probably imagine, there's all sorts of things that can happen along the way, weather, accidents. It's stressful, for the they're not supposed to move around on vehicles, so it can be stressful for the colonies. But, I don't want to, the commercial industry, my uncle is a commercial beekeeper, and the economics of beekeeping have moved a lot of beekeepers to get paid for pollination contracts because honey has been undervalued for a long time. And so, there's a reason the way that agriculture has moved has pushed beekeepers to do that. When I started out, I very quickly decided I did not want to be a commercial beekeeper for sustainability reasons, and not just for the bees, but, understanding, trucking things around the country with that frequency is not good for our environment either.
Sure, which makes sense. Absolutely, that in order for them to stay healthy, they have to usually follow their natural pattern, which probably isn't going on vacation to California and then coming back to Minnesota.
Well, yeah, and it's quite the opposite of a vacation, right?
You're right.
They should be vacationing in the winter, and then they're not working, but they bring them there, and then oops, wake up, here we go. You're working again. Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? And so I want to chat with you next about, what kind of environment do you need to have in your own land to, really have your beekeeping hobby successful. Before we get to that, I want to thank our next sponsor, Minnesota DNR, and Minnesota's wildlife management area are a vast array of lands across Minnesota. And there are approximately 1,400 wildlife management areas that are important for the protection of wildlife and Minnesota's outdoor recreation opportunities. And to find out more about Minnesota wildlife management areas, you can go to mndnr.gov/WMAS. So speaking of land, do you need to have quite a bit of land for beekeeping? I'm assuming that if you're, living in kind of a suburban or urban environment, you probably don't want bees in your backyard. Like, how much space do you need for beekeeping?
Well, actually, the physical footprint of a hive is not very big at all. It's roughly, a 1 foot by 1.5 foot box that you're putting the bees in, and the bees forage 2 to 5 miles. And so when you're thinking about putting hives on your property, the most important things to think about are, will they affect your neighbors negatively? So if they're close to a property line, but I've been keeping bees in the city for a long time and haven't really had any issues. It's more about whether or not there are a lot of lawn chemicals being used in suburbs, especially, and that can really negatively impact the bees. And then just if you're out in the country, for example, row crop agriculture, especially corn and soybeans, do not support pollinators. And so the closer you are to that kind of agriculture, the worse the bees do. And so when people are, looking for a place to put their colonies, I often tell them, make sure there's some sort of either vegetative barrier between you and that cornfield, or that you get them as far away from that as possible. And unfortunately, Minnesota's landscape has changed dramatically towards that kind of agriculture, and you see the pollinator decline follow that.
Yeah, that is interesting for sure. I can imagine just based off of chemicals that are used, that can be very challenging, obviously, for bees. Do you need to have quite a few, wildflowers planted, or, things that they can pollinate? Is it helpful to have that in your own yard, or they can go find it 2 to 5 miles away?
I mean, any amount of flowers you plant is helpful and awesome. And I would encourage, people thinking about beekeeping because they want to help bees, make it a priority to plant flowers. The bees are, they're very efficient and they're generalists. So they're going to go to the closest, most abundant food source first. and then work their way out. So yes, absolutely planting flowers in your yard is great. But it takes millions of flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's important to think about what's around you. And, a lot of people don't realize that trees are incredibly important forage for bees. Maple trees are one of the first pollens, poplars, and box elder. There's a ton of trees that give pollen. Black locust gives it incredible nectar flow in June in our area. So there's a lot of opportunities with trees as well as flowers.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I love, all of these little tips for advice, because if you're not really interested in becoming a beekeeper and investing in that sort of hobby, there's things that you can do, obviously, by planting trees and flowers within your own yard to help pollinators. Are there any other tips that people can do if they're not necessarily a beekeeper, but they want to help the bee population?
Yeah, I think that the awareness of what you're buying and what you're putting in your land, just get used to dandelions.
Yeah.
They're a wonderful plant, and I think they're beautiful when the lawn turns yellow in the springtime after having no color for 4 or 5 months. So I think, yes, promoting floral diversity, sourcing. One bent that I'm really focused on right now is getting folks to pay attention to farming practices, because really when it comes down to it, it's the way we grow food that is negatively impacting pollinators. But there are farmers out there, small sustainable farmers, and even medium size as well, that are doing really great things to support the ecosystems around them. And so as eaters, we can be and consumers, we can be seeking those people out and purchasing food from them. And as we also found out with the COVID crisis, that supply chains are vulnerable, and it only is going to serve us better if we're sourcing from the farmers around us that are doing right by the environment.
Very true. It's always very beneficial to support local sustainable farming practices. Absolutely. I love that advice. And I want to ask you a couple more questions about, some of the equipment that's needed. And you have a really unique piece of equipment that you use to extract honey. And before we get to that, we are going to switch from honey to drinking water. And not only am I picky about the food that I eat, and of course that we want to support where we're buying our honey. I'm also picky when it comes to drinking water, and I have the reverse osmosis drinking water system from Connecticut. I love it. I've had it for many, many years. It takes out contaminants in the water, it removes chlorine, and most importantly, it tastes great. And having the Connecticut drinking water system also means less use of plastic water bottles, which is also very beneficial for our environment. So for more information, visit Connecticut.com to find a dealer near you. All right, Kristy. So when it comes to beekeeping and all the equipment that you need, obviously, kind of run through, I guess, some of the basic things that you would need if you're just starting from scratch. And then we're going to get to your special extractor that you have.
Sure. The basic setup involves a couple boxes that come with frames that the bees build wax off of. And so you'll need the bottom, they call it a bottom board, which is what the boxes sit on top of. And then you fill those boxes with frames that you put the bees in there, and they will draw wax from those frames. And what else do you need? A top cover. So it's basically this 2-box or 3-box setup that you put the bees in, and then you would add more boxes as they grow. You need a smoker. I highly recommend covering your face. but a full suit. In our classes, a lot of what we're teaching is people to get comfortable around bees, because we all have this kind of inherent fear, as they do sting and it does hurt and it can be deadly for some people. And so it's really important that you feel comfortable around bees before you become. I think that's one of the keys to successful beekeeping, is letting go of that fear. And it's a very powerful experience too. I remember when I realized the minute I wasn't afraid of them anymore.
I bet.
Yeah. And then a hive tool, which is like, it's like a beekeeper's, you use it for everything. And that's to pry apart those frames and those boxes, because the bees, they're clever and they stick everything together with this substance called propolis, which is tree resin, which is incredibly healthy for the bees and for people. And that comes from trees as well. So that's kind of the basic setup of the hive. And of course you need the bees. And, just one tip, if you're thinking about doing this year, get on it now. You want your equipment put together and painted on the outside to protect it from weather. And you want everything ready to go before your bees arrive. Yeah.
And, speaking of healthy, there are a ton of health benefits to eating honey, including, it's full of antioxidants. And, I was reading that some claim that if you eat honey that has been produced locally, that it can help with allergies. I don't know if you know anything about that, if that's true or not true. I don't know if it's been scientifically studied, but it is kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's one of those things when you start selling honey, you get advice from your beekeeping mentors to say, don't make any public health claims.
Sure, yeah.
But yes, testimonials will tell you that the recommendation is a tablespoon of honey per day. For example, I put it in my coffee in the morning it's a much better sweetener for your body. Because it metabolizes different. Sugar sits in your blood, where honey actually it activates your kind of the like athletes will take it before a race or something like that. So yeah, honey has a lot of beneficial qualities. It's actually a really good cough syrup. Honey and water, and people, especially from East African countries, consider it to be like medicine. So we'll get customers who, they use it for everything, and it makes sense, right? It's the essential part of the flowers from all over the landscape. So it's pretty cool that they let us eat it.
Absolutely. And I recently spent some time with an herbalist who lives locally in Minneapolis, and she eats all of the natural weeds, including dandelions and ground ivy and all of these other things that pop up in her yard. And there's a lot of medicinal purposes just within some of the weeds that she has, or all of us have, growing in our yards. And we're so used to picking those and throwing those out. And it is interesting how nature really can provide some wonderful, medicinal type foods to help with a lot of different, things, from sinuses to allergies to other stuff. And we are fortunate that bees allow us to take that honey and extract it. And speaking of extraction, one of the things that makes your company so unique and so fun is you have developed a pedal powered extractionator. I don't know how you say that, but it's bike powered. And can you explain to us what that is a little bit?
Yeah, where were you when we were choosing name? I like the extractionator.
Oh, okay.
No, we call it the Beez Kneez honey cycle. And when I first started this business, I was given a broken hand crank extractor, and I was an avid cyclist, and I started the business delivering honey on bicycle. And so I what my friend Carl, who was a bike mechanic, I paid him in a 6-pack of beer, and we literally designed this honeycycle, and it took 5 generations of designs to get it right, but I started selling them a couple years ago. So the Landscape Arboretum has a couple, and the University of Minnesota Bee Squad bought one. So I'm really proud of it. And we're renting out our Beez Kneez honey house in Minneapolis to beekeepers since 2013. They could come and bring their honey and cycle it out, and the family would come and everyone would have a good sticky time. And then, they'd leave with their honey and we would clean up the mess afterwards. And that was a really, really amazing thing. And COVID shut it down last year. And but I really, the honey cycles is pretty great.
It is so cool. And I had a chance to extract honey on the cycle. And it's a fun way to obviously see the honey, obviously get extracted, but also it's great exercise. And I just think it was the coolest extractor I've ever seen.
Thank you.
And you are, speaking of, I understand that you're moving from Minneapolis to Wisconsin. So will people be able to find you there? Are you moving to a bigger space? What's the news on that?
Yeah, so we have been renting this space here in Minneapolis since 2013. And, there were several circumstances that pushed me to move the business. A couple years ago, my partner and I moved out and we bought a farm, 30 acres on the Trade River in western Wisconsin. And the plan was to end up out there. I keep a lot of bees for production in that area. And so the opportunity came up to do so. And financial circumstances also pushed us that direction. And so, I'll be constructing a honey house out there. People will still be able to rent the honey cycles. I don't know about extracting inside because we don't know what COVID will do.
Sure.
But I will be, not a whole lot is changing, except I won't be selling honey out of this space and beekeeping equipment. But I will continue to teach the classes, and I'm hoping to continue to sell equipment, but we'll see how the transition goes. So,
sure.
Yeah, it's bittersweet. The space I'm in was Kickstarter funded, so we raised $40,000 in 2013 to build out the space to make it a honey house. And we've spent some really good years here and done some amazing things I'm super proud of. But this is just the next phase, and I'm looking forward to serving beekeepers out there as well.
Awesome. And you still will continue your Beez Kneez camp and your classes in Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, we're actually taking registrations right now. It starts in April. There's, I think, about 8 spots left. And one of the camps is in Fridley, Minnesota. So at Springbrook Nature Center. So we'll continue to do that. And then another one is in Osceola, Wisconsin, which is not too far from the cities, at Lily Springs Farm.
Awesome. And if people want more information on where to find you and your website, and of course, if they want to sign up for the camp or the class, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is www.thebeezkneesdelivery.com, and bees and knees are both spelled with Z's. So that's the best way to get all the information. And then, of course, we're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter.
And we need to tell people that you sell your honey at your store. So if they are just interested in getting the fruit of all the labor, they can find that on your website as well, right?
Yes, we sell online. We do ship USPS, and then we wholesale to all the major food co-ops in town and a few grocery stores. And we'll have a pickup site at Seward Makes on Franklin Avenue, so people can still order direct. And then I'll be coming in to the city once a week to bring orders, so that can still happen. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kristy, for spending the time to chat with us and regarding to our important pollinators and bees and beekeeping. And we appreciate all that you do for the bee population, because my goodness, if we didn't have bees, we would all really be in trouble. So we appreciate all that you do for the bee population.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. That's it for today's Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. Again, if you want more information on Kristy's Beez Kneez honey, the bike extractor, or any other information on beekeeping, you can find her at thebeeskneesdelivery.com. And that's a wrap for today. And we just want to thank our last sponsor, Star Bank.
Hi there. Ron Schara here for Star Bank. If you're putting your money into mega banks down the street, who knows where that money's being used? Bank locally. Keep your money local with a community bank that actually cares about you, your family, your business, and your goals. Check out the bank we use at Minnesota Bound. Try Minnesota's own Star Bank. You can find them online at starbank.net. When you call Star Bank, you actually hear a real living person answering the phone. Star Bank has 10 convenient locations around Minnesota to serve you and all the mobile banking products that you need to manage your money. Check out all that Star Bank has to offer at starbank.net.